Many civil engineering firms fail at succession planning. They're not thinking early enough about the next generation of leaders. Well, that's not the case for Choice One Engineering. In today's episode of the Civil Engineering CEO, my guest Matt Hoying is a project manager and president at Choice One Engineering, and he became president at a young age, roughly 10 years out of school. And he did that because his company was committed to transitioning in the next generation of leaders. In this episode, he's going to talk about how important that is. He's also going to talk about how every company should have a mission, vision, and values that they're communicating with their employees, which is critical for growing the firm long term. Before we jump in with Matt, a quick word from our sponsor, BigTime.
Oh my God, this is amazing. I love it.
Got it. Wow, Dave, this is amazing. This is really, really cool.
The software is great. I love this program.
These are the real reactions of BigTime customers when they first toured the software. BigTime gives engineering firms the visibility they need to operate more efficiently and maximize profits. From project creation to client payments, BigTime streamlines operations with intuitive budgeting, project management, and invoicing solutions. Schedule your tour of the #1 rated professional services automation software at bigtime.net. Now I'd like to welcome my guest onto the show today. Matt Hoying is a licensed professional engineer, president, and project manager at Choice One Engineering. Matt, welcome to the Civil Engineering CEO.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Anthony.
All right, Matt. So first of all, start off about telling us about your company, where you're located, what services you offer, how many offices, employees.
Yeah, so Choice One Engineering, we are located in Ohio, mainly in the western half of Ohio. We have 2 offices, one in Sydney, one in Loveland on the northeast side of Cincinnati. We have 65 employees, a few more signed up to start with us here in a month or so after graduation, but right around 65 employees. The basic services we provide in the civil engineering space are around the transportation sector and private development. 60% of our work is with the local public municipalities, government agencies, and 40 to 45% of our work is in with the residential developers, commercial developers. That's kind of our day-to-day from the professional services side of it. What we really focus on here is making lives better with an enjoyable experience. That's how we view it, is going to be our ability to transform our world. It happens to happen most often through civil engineering, surveying, and landscape architecture, but our main focus is really how do we make people's lives better.
That's great. That's awesome. And so you personally, I mean, to be a president of a firm, you're a pretty young professional. So congratulations on that. And maybe we can dive into that a little bit. Tell us about kind of your career path and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thank you. Well, it starts, I really have to go back to giving credit to my parents. When I was growing up, they allowed me to really find out who I was and allowed me to hone in on my interest in helping people and helping people achieve their goals. They never pushed me to be the leader, the star athlete, the star academic. They really allowed me to hone in what I like to do. And that's really how I got into engineering, honestly. I thought I was going to go to school and be a math teacher, go to college, be a math teacher. I had a high school math teacher that was very impactful to me. And he actually took some time one day after class, asked me where I was going to school, what I was doing. When I told him I was going to go to the University of Dayton, be a math teacher, he looked at me and said, "Don't do that. You'll be a terrible math teacher." And I was taken back, but he explained himself and he was absolutely right. He had witnessed me, he'd watched me tutor other students throughout the years. And what he realized was that I really excel whenever people are in their journey and along their path and just need some help getting to the finish line. But if they're really struggling in the beginning, that's where I struggle, is getting them from point A to B. In math terms, if you're going to ask me why 2 + 2 = 4, I'm really going to struggle explaining the quadratic formula to you. So he realized that, and he said, well, if you're going to be a math teacher, you're always going to have the students that either don't care to be there or are struggling. They want to be there, but are struggling with the basic concepts. And so it would be frustrating for me. It would be frustrating for them as students. And I really wouldn't have the impact that I wanted to have. So he asked me, what else are you thinking of doing? And I told him, I've always wanted to help people achieve their goals. Maybe I'd go into business and get into people management. And he stopped me for a second and asked if I had thought about engineering. And I really hadn't. And he went into it and said, engineering, you can get into project management, which is really people management, and set yourself apart a little bit from the kids getting the general business degrees, get into an engineering role and lead people that way. So I kind of said, okay, let's give it a shot. Went in, and the passion for me has never really been around the engineering and the technical part of our projects. The passion for me has been helping our clients and helping our people achieve their goals and doing what they wanted to do. So I was fortunate enough to get in as a summer co-op into Choice One Engineering. It was a local organization that really focused on the people, and that's why Choice One was around. That's why they were founded, and focused on the people side of the business. Yeah, the engineering and the surveying, that part of it had to be there, but the intangible part, the little extra that they focused on the people, really resonated with me. And I've been at Choice One ever since. I started here full time in 2007 as an engineer, project engineer, designer, and did that for about 4.5 years. And myself and another engineer here at that time decided we wanted to go to Loveland and start another office for our company. It was the first time we made that venture as a company, and we thought, let's give it a shot. Brian really focused on the engineering and the project management side, and I kind of focused more on the business development and the building relationships with the client side, and played that role within the organization for about 5.5 years. And the president of the organization at the time, who's been a great mentor for me, sat down with me in the beginning of 2016, and in our development plan conversation asked me, what do you want to do over the next 6 months? What's our plan? And at that point, we were about 2.5 years into a transition plan for me to take over as president for him. The thought was that was going to happen January 1st of 2021. And this was now April of 2016. And we both kind of came to the conclusion that, now's the right time for both of us. We were going to be kind of sitting around watching each other, learning from each other. Yes. But I felt like I was as ready as I was ever going to be. He felt like he was ready to help Choice One best in his next role. And so we said, let's make this happen in the fall of 2016. And we made that transition. Fortunately, he kind of was willing to do that slow transition process, which was good for me. It gave me the chance to learn a lot from him and some of the other senior leaders in the organization, and get to the point where I wasn't 100% confident I could do it, but I felt like I was as far along in that path as I was going to get, until I actually just jumped in and did it. So I've been acting as president of the company since the end of 2016, and learning something new every day. But it's been really enjoyable for me, and really it's kind of allowed me to fulfill that passion of mine of helping people.
That's awesome. That's a great story. And I think a couple of things that stand out to me. One, for civil engineers out there that want to get into executive leadership, it doesn't have to be a 20 to 30 year journey. You can do it quicker than that, depending on the circumstances that surround you, of course. And I think really what stands out for me, Matt, is Choice One had a great succession plan, right? They really thought about transitioning new leaders into the company. And I think a lot of civil engineering companies, just being honest, from the companies we work with, just don't do a good job at that. I mean, they have a lot of stuff going on. And I think, you have to think about that, because that's the future of your company. So I think kind of kudos to your leadership for thinking about it and taking the opportunity to work with you and bring you along and set up that transition time, which I think is a great thing. And I think that if you're listening out there, and your firm hasn't done that, you really should think about it, because it can make or break the future, of course, of your company, getting the right leaders in the right positions as soon as possible. So I think that's
I will forever be in debt and grateful to Tony and and Jeff here, who allowed that transition to happen over a long period of time. I've learned from talking to a lot of other company leaders that that's not the case in a lot of places, as you mentioned, that there's sometimes all you have is that 6 months. And it helped me, but I think it also helped everybody else here be comfortable with that transition because they knew it was happening. They had the chance to get to know me and my leadership style and realize, determine whether they thought they would fit within that, the next generation of Choice One.
Yeah, no, that's great. So that being said, you've been president for 5 years. You've obviously been managing people for some time now. What would your staff say is your management style? How would they describe your management style if you asked them, do you think?
I think they would describe it as a servant leader. I've always been someone who really enjoyed jumping in and helping people. Their accomplishments have been a higher priority to me than my own personal accomplishments. So when people need help, I'm happy to jump in and help wherever I can. I like to lead by example. I'm not somebody who's necessarily in the front, stand up and talking and saying, listen to me, this is how we should be doing things. I'm somebody who likes to get everybody's input, and I don't know what I don't know. I'm certainly not the smartest person at the organization. I just happen to have a passion and interest around this role. And so I feel like I can play this role very well, but when it comes to other decisions, whether it's on a project or other leadership conversations, I know that I'm not the expert in that. So it's very valuable for me to pull in everybody's thoughts and input. And it's one of the things I value about the level of engagement our employees have here is there isn't anybody that's not willing to provide that input and offer suggestions and sit down with me and have that conversation, help me think through things.
That's great. That's awesome. And I'm not familiar with Choice One. I didn't know Matt before. Just a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn, I found him and reached out to him. But I can just kind of guess that the leadership is pretty, visionary. They're looking ahead. The fact that they've got Matt and some other younger professionals on board, and it's good to hear, Matt, that your style is not just servant leadership, but also getting information from people, right? Asking questions, trying to relying on others. I think that's an important aspect of the world we live in today, which kind of leads in pretty well into the next question, which is, it's been a rough couple of years for everybody between COVID and just a lot of work in the civil field, and everyone's really busy, and it's hard finding people to hire. It's been a roller coaster ride, to say the least. So just a question for you. You're cultivating your leadership skills, I'm sure, every day still. Like you said, you're still learning. How do you kind of stay even keeled and not kind of overreact to situations or underreact necessarily, especially when you have a company now looking to you at how you're handling things?
Yeah, a great question. I really think I probably have to go back to the way I was raised in this, that it's something that I felt like I've always either not been excited enough or never too excited. I've kind of always rode that middle, and there's people here that will joke with me about, man, you're not nearly excited about that. Or, that we've got a couple specific examples where we had some project managers jumping up and down, high-fiving each other. And I'm just, okay, great. This is awesome, but let's move on to the next thing. And let's see how we can build on this and make this better. But I think the reality is it's just some realization that it is what it is. I try to be present and live in the moment. And, at that moment, things may seem great or things may not seem great, but we're going to get through it. It may not end up being as great as we thought it was, or it may end up being not as bad as we thought it was. But what I try to focus on, we got a plan, move forward through the future, but let's enjoy where we're at right now. And it's just something that I think has kind of been innate in me to take those opportunities, take a breath and say, this is awesome. Let's acknowledge this, or this really didn't go very well. We need to acknowledge this, but there's something to learn from this. Let's move forward and see how this is going to make us better tomorrow or next week or next year.
That's great. That's great. It's obviously something that's really important right now. Like I said, there's lots of things going on in the civil world, lots of good things for sure, but it doesn't mean that it's easy, and you have to kind of keep that, keep your head on straight, so to speak, to kind of keep firms going in the right direction. So it's good to hear that. Let's talk about technology a little bit, Matt. Technology is I mean, it's huge everywhere, but especially in the civil engineering world, there's lots of new technology that's coming out, software tools. For a company your size, some of these larger companies, obviously, that do hundreds of millions of dollars a year, they probably have a lot of money where they can invest in technology and things of that nature. How does a firm your size kind of keep your heartbeat on technology and make sure you're using the right technology and you're growing where you need to in that way?
Yeah, that's something that really has been a focus for ours. Is we kind of say we want to be on the leading edge, not on the bleeding edge of technology or softwares, new programs that come out. We have a couple people internally who kind of specifically focus on staying in touch with what's the latest and greatest. But part of their role is to evaluate that. Is this something we need to jump into right now? Will this really be a benefit for us? Is it worth the investment? Or is this something that, there's probably going to be more iterations that come, and 2 or 3 versions of this later is where they're really going to have things worked out, and this is where we need to jump into this investment at this time. There's a lot of trends that come and go, and we try to make sure that we're not over investing in some of those front end trends that end up not panning out. But we also realize the importance, not only to be productive, but also important to provide our people with the right tools. We can't be too far behind either. As a company, we're very transparent, both financially and just business management side. And so pretty much everybody here has dove into the culture and the mindset of being conservative on our investments, but understanding that those investments are how we're going to move the company forward. So yes, we need to make investments. We need to improve our technology as necessary, but let's not spend too much money on the front end of that if it's not required. More often than not, I'll have somebody come to me kind of with it already laid out. Here's why we think this is the right time to make this investment. Here's what this is going to cost. Here's the payback. Those kind of things. So it's pretty nice for me. I don't really need to be doing that analysis myself. And that's one of the great things about people being so committed to the company and the success of the company is I can trust that they're going to be making a decision best for the whole rather than just best for them individually.
I think that's great. I think it's a really smart approach. I mean, there's all new technologies popping up, and if we just jump on something that comes up without really letting it develop and maybe getting data on it and seeing if there's any case studies on it, you could just keep picking different technologies. So I think there's definitely a balancing act. I think you want to be out in front with the technology, but you also want to be smart about it and make sure that you're using programs that work, that aren't overly complicated for your staff. And so it sounds like you've got a good way to kind of balance that out. And you did say something there that I think is important, which is, some trends last for a while, some don't, which kind of leads nicely into my next question, which is just thinking a little bit about the hybrid work environment. Obviously, we went through a period after COVID where most firms were almost 100% remote. Then we started getting back to more in person. Some firms are still mixed. Tell us about Choice One. How are you set up now? Is it remote? Is it in person? How do you see that going forward in terms of long term and how that might affect the company?
Yeah. Well, I think I want to go back to right before COVID. We really had very limited work from home capabilities here at Choice One. It was not something we had invested in or jumped into. We really focused on the culture of being collaborative and being in the same environment and having the opportunities to learn from each other. When COVID came, we went home, everyone worked from home, spun that up pretty quickly. And we were there for 6 weeks, from the end of March through the beginning of May. And we were surveying our people throughout that time working from home. How is this working? Is this being effective? Do you like this setup better, worse? What are pluses and minuses? Nothing's ever 100% great or 100% not great. So we had to evaluate that. But we really had our people asking to be back in the office. So we made some changes to the office setup so that we could keep people distance, keep people safe. That was important. That was a must from my end. Was we need to make sure that we can keep people safe if they're going to be in here. But people here at Choice One really love the ability to learn from each other. And we did not find a way to replicate that effectively in that 6-week trial period when we were at home. Candidly, that may not have been long enough to fully take the time to learn that, but that's where we were as a company. And our employees, through our surveys, we had over 90% of our employees wanted to be back in the office. So since that time, we now have the capability of work from home. Our current model is work from the office unless there's a reason to work remote. So, doctor's appointments, have the repairman come into your house, whatever the case may be. On occasion, work from home when that makes sense, and you certainly have the ability to do that. But we've asked people to come back in the office, and we've seen a big benefit from that. A lot of our employees, over half of our employees, have been here for less than 3 years, and so having that ability to have people learn together was important to us. We tried it from home. Everyone's accessible through Zoom chat, through a cell phone. But what we found is we never really replicated that. Hey, I overhear you talking about this in the cubicle over from mine. I'm going to come join that conversation because it'll help me learn. Those were the kind of things that we were missing. And I give the credit to our employees for figuring out that was important to them, that was going to be important to their career growth and their personal, professional growth, and helping us find ways to be able to come back and operate in a safe manner. We kept the separation. We eliminated a lot of the in-person meetings that we were having that could be on Zoom and things like that. Everybody kind of jumped in and said, let's solve this together because this is so important to us. Candidly, they were asking to be back sooner than I was sure we were ready to be back. I wasn't sure we fully knew what COVID was at that time, in 6 weeks yet. But it was nice to see the team come together and want to continue to learn, want to continue to provide the best service that we could for our clients and honestly for each other.
No, that's great. And I think, listen, there's no right or wrong answer to this. I think it's very company specific in terms of what your work environment's going to look like going forward. And I think as long as a company, to your point, surveys and understands the feelings, thoughts, wishes of their team members, and they can incorporate that and come up with a collaborative solution, I think that's just the way to go. And it sounds like you've done that. And I've heard people in all different scenarios through this show and some of our other avenues. Some companies are doing all back in person, some are still all remote, and there's all in between. Really, it's just a function of the company and the team and what everyone feels comfortable with. So it's glad to hear that you were able to flex like that. Let's talk about infrastructure a little bit. There's the big Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was passed not long ago. Money will be coming to all of the states in a lot of different sectors of infrastructure. Talk about how that's going to affect, you think, our industry, but really geographically for you, regionally, how it's going to affect Choice One and maybe the growth of your firm going forward and how you're going to have to operate.
Yeah. Man, I wish I had that crystal ball to know for sure. But the way I see it is, there's going to be an influx in funding available for the projects. And it seems specifically for Choice One in a lot of the types of projects that we work with 60% of our work being in that public sector government side. So I definitely see there being some funds available to move projects up for clients of ours, which will be great. The interesting thing about it that I see coming up is how will that work? Current supply chain issues, inflation costs. What this bill would have funded last year isn't anything close to what it'll fund this year from dollars of construction. And we've seen 30 to 35% inflation in some of the construction costs. That I believe is going to be unsustainable. I think we're going to have to that's going to have to level off at some point in time. And so the bigger concern for me is, will we have the materials and the labor to do these projects that this bill will potentially be funding? So I could see it from our industry standpoint being being in the situation where the client has a project, they hire the engineer to design, and the plans need to sit on the shelf for a while because the contractor labor is not there, or the material to build the projects availability isn't there. So I think it'll be a boost in the arm, shot in the arm to boost work in the industry for a period, and then I think it may actually lead to some repercussions and slowdown of that. Now, the nice thing is this is a bill and not a stimulus, and so it's going to be, I think for 5 years, if I have my numbers right, so we'll have 5 years of this funding moving projects forward. That'll be a nice benefit, as opposed to if this was purely a stimulus package, where now there's a lot of money entering the market in a market that can't handle it right now.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, and you make a great point that even $1 trillion, which sounds crazy, just isn't $1 trillion still went from when the bill, when it all came out, because of inflation and everything that's gone on with the supply chain. So that will be interesting to see how that unfolds. All right, Matt, in terms of diversity and inclusion, that's something that's really been talked about a lot in the world of civil engineering. Talk a little bit about Choice One, your perspective on diversity and inclusion, and how you try to, incorporate kind of different perspectives into what you do.
Yeah. So one of the models, I guess, that we follow here is that your actions are a derivative of your emotions, which come from your thoughts. Your thoughts being formulated by your values, your beliefs, your environment, which includes your background. So the value of diversity for me and for Choice One is to have a diverse background that's going to generate that diverse thought, and then lead to the diversity in action. If there were 65 Matt Hoyings, no one would want to work at a company like that. But if there were 65 people that thought exactly like me, Choice One would not be anywhere near where we are today. And so that diversity in thought, that diversity in interest, is very important for the growth of any organization, engineering or not, in my opinion. One of the things that at Choice One we've struggled with is finding that diversity. One, in the markets that we are located in, it's just not a very diverse population in general anyway. So we've really struggled with finding the diverse employee, diverse employees to bring into the company. But it has been a focus of ours, especially lately. And one of the things that we've really tried to ramp up our co-op and in our internship program with is trying to match the diversity that is in the schools, that is in the university and the engineering programs. We want to try to put a focus on finding those people who will help Choice One become a better Choice One, that will help our clients become better, really living our purpose, vision, mission, having those qualities that are important to us, but also the diverse background, because I think that's how we're going to continue to be able to be nimble and to navigate what the future brings, and really be on a growth trajectory for the foreseeable future.
That's great. No, I hear you. And that is, I think, a problem is sometimes finding that diversity, right? You can be committed to it. And I really like your approach at Choice One. It's a real holistic approach, right? Go back, take it back a few steps. Your actions are driven by your thoughts, and your thoughts are driven by your background. And so trying to cultivate those different backgrounds is really important. But you're right, I think part of that goes back to, educating people about engineering at young ages and doing it in communities across the country. Even communities that aren't as well off, and we need to do a better job at that, I think, as an industry. And you're starting to see more and more STEM activity and STEM clubs and STEM teachings, which is great. And hopefully that'll help to close that gap and make it easier for companies like Choice One to find those employees, quite frankly.
Yeah, and I will say, personally for myself, my mindset around diversity has changed in the last several years. And I think that's what it takes. That's what it's going to take for us as a company, for all of us as companies, to to acknowledge that we're going to need to put more of an effort into driving that diversity in the future. As you said, we're trying to get more out into the high schools. I didn't know what civil engineering was as a senior in high school. I'm not sure I knew what it was as a freshman in college, to be completely honest with you. And so trying to get out and show that the career paths that are out there in our space will be an important part of helping, be proactive about growing the diversity in our space in general. And then hopefully that leads back to diversity within Choice One, selfishly for our own purpose, but we need to do it for the greater good of the industry and society, as opposed to where we were in the past just looking for how can Choice One become more diverse.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Come to think of it, I went to high school. From high school, I liked math and science. So somebody told me you should try to be an engineer. And then when I got in college, somebody told me if you like being outdoors, you should try civil engineering. So it wasn't like I had a big background on civil engineering or, what it meant or what it was. So I think we do need to really educate people about that. All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit here, Matt. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions that I often get from up and coming civil engineers just to get your take on it. First one being, what is the number one trait that you feel is important for civil engineering professionals to have today?
That's a great question. I'm not sure that my mind it's different today than it was 5 years ago or 15 years ago when I started. I still think it's the ability to communicate effectively. I think a lot of things that progress happen because of good communications, and a lot of things that don't progress happen because of poor communication, whether that's people or professional development, or that's projects or client relationships. I think the basis always starts with good communication. I think that's a very broad answer. There's a lot of things that tie into that. It's the interest and the ability to speak up, to share your diversity in thought, for example. It's all of those kind of things that relate in my mind to communication is the most important thing, in my opinion. If you want to become better at anything you're trying to do, is being willing to speak up and share your opinion and communicate that opinion effectively and clearly really helps people. In my situation as a leader, if someone writes me a note or sends me an email, hey, what do you think about this? It almost always requires an email back. It's a great thought, help me understand it more. It's hard to understand what people are really thinking in a 1 or a 2 line email, a note on a set of plans that you're marking up. It's always more valuable to sit down and have that 5, 10, sometimes 30 or an hour conversation with people, because that conversation and communication helps the understanding level from both sides.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think communication is absolutely critical. And you alluded to it earlier too, when you talked about project management and how, project management, a lot of it is interacting with people. And, we have conversations with firms all the time at EMI through the corporate training programs that we run. And a lot of times when people think of project management, they'll be like, hey, scope, schedule, budget, we need to train our staff on that. And that's like a very important part of project management. But the other side of it is people, communicating with people, managing people, interacting with people, meeting clients and coworkers. And so I couldn't agree with you more. I think that skill is critical for all civil engineering professionals today. And I think it will be, like you said, I don't think it's something that changes going forward. I mean, I think if anything, our projects are getting more complex. So I think you have to deal with more people and more challenges, which would mean communication will become even more and more important. All right, Matt, another question that I often get from civil engineers is, how can I make sure that I'm adding value to my organization?
I think value starts with alignment. And what I mean by that is, if you understand what's important to your organization, for us at Choice One, we spend a lot of time defining and trying to clarify our purpose, vision, mission, core values, culture, how we behave at Choice One. And that's really where the value comes from. If you're aligned with the organization and can help them make decisions that align with the direction the company wants to go, that's invaluable, in my opinion. It's whenever someone comes to you and clearly identifies, hey, I've thought about this through our filter, We kind of talk about that being our decision filter at Choice One. You run it through, does it satisfy purpose, vision, mission? And then operationally, will this fit within our organization? Those kind of things almost always produce aligned results that are seen as valuable by everybody within the organization. So it takes understanding, it takes questioning. If your organization, if your leadership isn't sharing that freely, if they're not as transparent maybe as some other organizations, as we try to be at Choice One, making sure you sit down and you ask people, what is the most important thing? Is it some companies, maybe it's the budget. Some companies, it's how we're going to develop our people, and so the budget's less important. None of that is right or wrong. We have a way that's right for Choice One, but that doesn't mean it's right for anybody else. That's one of my big beliefs. Is my experiences and my opportunities here at Choice One have been great, but they've been great because I meshed with the values of Choice One. I would go somewhere else and I would have to be a different type of leader. I'd have to have carved out a different path. So I really think it's alignment around understanding that alignment, and trying to align yourself and your thought process around the organization and their goals.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, understand where your company wants to go and help them get there, and understand their values, which I think is important. And you're right, it has to really be communicated from the leadership to the rest of the firm. But at the same time, if it's not happening that way, you can certainly ask, where's the company going? What's our plan? And I think that's great advice. That's awesome. All right. So what if one of your employees came to you and said, Matt, what is one business challenge that I can solve that would make the single biggest impact on the organization? How would you answer that question?
Well, actually, ironically, we just had our all hands company meeting this morning, and we've been saying it for a while now that for us, the two biggest challenges that's going to get in the way of Choice One's growth are cybersecurity and employee growth. Can we bring in the number of people we need to match our ability to grow revenue and our ability to continue to provide opportunity for people? Cybersecurity is probably less of something that employees here at Choice One or within the own organization will be able to affect as much. But so then I lean towards, how do we help hire people? How do we help bring the right people in? We're really viewing it as, how do we market to the future employees? How do we take our marketing efforts? How do we, when we go to conferences, how do we use those as recruiting tools? We're going to a conference, yes, to learn, but there's also a lot of opportunities to have conversations with fellow engineers, with fellow designers, or other professionals there, and understand what opportunities might there be for them to come support us in our organization. So I think that's, if there's a single biggest challenge that employees can help with, it would be help us share the message, help us share our employee value proposition. Why would people want to work at Choice One as opposed to anywhere else? And help them understand, is this right for them? As I mentioned before, Choice One's not right for everybody. And that doesn't mean that they're wrong. That's actually great that they know that. I hope that everybody is working at a spot where their values are aligned and they're getting the appreciation that they need and the ability to continue to grow and develop. We certainly aren't set up to bring every engineer in the world into Choice One engineering, but we want to bring the ones that are aligned with us and have similar goals as us here, and help grow those opportunities for them to continue to become better people and better engineers as their careers progress.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think everyone's facing that challenge, and I think it might get a little bit harder with some of the infrastructure funding that we talked about, which could bring on some more work. But at the same time, I really agree with Matt's perspective there, in that you got to go somewhere where you're going to really enjoy working. And if you as an employee can spread that message of your firm, it could be one of the best things you can do to help the firm grow. So that's great. All right, Matt, I'm going to wrap up here with just a couple of last questions related to yourself personally. When you come to work every day, obviously you got a lot going on as a leader in the firm, president of the firm. How do you decide what you work on each day? What does that look like in the process?
I'm not sure that I have a great, this is the way to do it, but this is how I do it. I'll share my experience. Obviously, there's the urgent things, whether it's project related or sometimes internally related. I'm still involved in project management at Choice One. So there are some project related things that I need to work on, whether that's coordinating design teams or communication with the clients. That often takes priority, but there's also the president's role. There's also the visionary role that I have more passion around, I would say. And so it's easier for me to lean into those, as well as the people development. So I look at my schedule and I know what projects I have on my plate, and I know what that workload looks like. I know what our strategic plan and our vision is, and I kind of have a plan carved out for where I'm going in that. And there's different things every day that I need to be doing in that. And then I try to leave a certain amount of my availability open for the things that I don't know that are going to come up. I view my role here as making sure that our employees have the resources they need to be successful, whether that's equipment, whether that's time, whether that's the ability to have a conversation with somebody, if they need some mentoring, coaching, whatever the case may be. And so there's always some of that I walk in every day. I don't know what's going to come up. I don't know what kind of things people might be struggling with, or what kind of opportunities people might see and want to pursue further and want to talk it through with somebody. So I try to always make sure that I'm available for people, our people here, to have those conversations. So that part of it is the part that's difficult for me to manage, I would say, because it's hard for me to come in and say, I know I've got a 2-hour conversation lined up here, or I've got 20 minutes with Casey, and then when her and I are done, then I've got another half hour with Jake. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. So that's why I say I don't know if I've got a great answer with that, but I do try to compartmentalize my role into kind of those three buckets: the project management side, the visionary side, and then the people development side.
That's great. I mean, I love the idea of, focusing your role on, helping others in the firm grow. And I like the idea of really building some flexibility into your schedule, because to your point, there's going to be things that come up every day, whether you're president or wherever you are in an organization, that you weren't planning on. So having that flexibility to be able to work on those things, I think, is really important. Matt, in your personal or professional development efforts, you've obviously done a lot the last 5 years or so, learning to become a president, an executive, a leader. Has there maybe been a book that you might have read that stood out, that was extremely helpful for you in your development, that you might be willing to share?
Yeah, I think the one that would say most personally for me was Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold. It just helped me really put my mind around what being that visionary meant, and how to make that vision clear to everyone else, even though that they may not have as much of a day-to-day impact on what are we doing to move forward. What are we 3-5 years from now? What are we looking at? They're the ones that are going to help us get there. And they're the ones that day by day, even though they may not realize it, are the ones that are carrying out the plan. And so that book really helped me personally out. As an organization, we've really found a lot of value in a lot of Pat Lencioni's books. Ideal Team Player is one that we use as kind of a basis for our hiring. And then Drive from Daniel Pink, Purpose, Mastery, Autonomy. If people can have those 3 things in their job, they're going to be intrinsically motivated to continue to grow and develop. Those are 3 that come to my mind. The one more, like I said, the Vivid Vision, more on the personal side, but the other 2 were really kind of transformational for us as an organization on how do we move our processes forward in helping people enjoy their experience here at Choice One.
That's great. Now, last question, I was going to ask you if there are any CEOs or leaders in the industry that kind of you really look up to or that have helped you, but it sounds to me like your leadership there, being that you transitioned at such a young age, took you on this transition period. And it sounds to me like they were probably some of the most instrumental mentors in your career. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say, so Tony Schrader, who was the original president and one of the original founders, has been a mentor of mine and continues to be. He's less involved in the day-to-day. Jeff Putoff was his right-hand man in the generation 1 of Choice One, and he's still here. I still learn a tremendous amount from him every day, and and learning from his experiences and watching him process, the way that he goes about his job, and that transition of his role over the time. But those two have been really instrumental to me. I've also, I do get a ton of value out of my outside networks, whether it's other civil engineers or just other presidents of local businesses. Specifically civil engineering. I'm probably going to leave a couple out here, but Brian Sealaff from Tamarack Grove Engineering out in Idaho has been a really great friend and resource. Blake Calvert from Core Consulting in Denver. He's actually on my board of advisors at the moment. So he's been a great connection with network. Rob Matthews with Matthews Design Group down in Florida, Mike Munn with McAdams in North Carolina, and then Hiren Patel and Gordon Green also down in Florida from Patel Green Associates. Those guys they've been great. They're all fellow best firms to work for in the industry, award winners, and so it's been really great to know fellow CEOs and leaders that understood the value and put the importance to the culture and the people development of the employees. So it's great to have that resource of people that I know process things with the same importance in mind. We all have different cultures, so we can't ever just completely rip off and duplicate from one another. But we do try to R&D as much as we can in that way. But it is nice, to hear them, how they process things can trigger my thought of, that's not going to work here at Choice One, but I like the way that you're thinking about that, and it gets my own thought process started in a different path.
That's great. And I think that's so important to be able to lean on others in the industry and learn from them and bounce things off of each other. Having those kind of collaborative partners, I think, are so important in the growth of any company. And the same experience myself, and those are some great professionals you mentioned there. In fact, we've had a few of them on the podcast already. So thanks for sharing just some of your mentors. And I think it's important for all engineers out there, whether you're president of a company or not, you should have a mentor. You should find multiple mentors and try to keep in touch with them throughout your career for sure. Well, Matt Hoying, President and Project Manager, Choice One Engineering, I want to thank you so much for spending some time with me here on the Civil Engineering CEO. I really do appreciate it.
Anthony, thank you. It was great to have the ability to share my experiences. If it helps one of your listeners, it was worth it in my opinion. But I really appreciate what you're doing for the industry, and I appreciate the opportunity today.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation today with Matt. Obviously a talented young professional, and I'm happy that he took the time to come on and share his journey, because I know a lot of civil engineers that want to become young leaders in the field, and Matt is proof that you can do just that. If you enjoy the video, please consider subscribing to our channel here. We put out videos like this on a weekly basis to help engineers become better managers and leaders. I'll see you next week.